Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Love Your Library event. The Love Your Library program is an event series was launched back by the library in 2007 to connect FIT students with industry professionals, FIT alumni, and authors. Our hope is to bring a larger world of possibilities into our community's academic experience. Our panel discussions, maker events, and book talk embrace the broad interest of the FIT community. So today, I'm thrilled to present a captivating book discussion featuring the esteemed Dr. Susan Ashdown, an eminent figure in fashion academia. With a distinguished tenure at Cornell University, Dr. Ashdown, a vast reservoir of knowledge spans over 45 plus years, enriched by extensive experience in pattern making and broader apparel industry. So I have the absolute delight of encountering Dr. Ashdown at the inception of my second master's degree. Currently now myself, I'm a PhD candidate within the fashion department at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. Dr. Ashdown has provided me unwavering support and guidance, and has been a beacon of light throughout my Cornell University academic journey. And I'm profoundly grateful for the intersections of our path, especially today. So she'll be speaking about her book, Draping for Apparel Design, the fourth edition, published by Fairchild Books. And here's a copy if you guys haven't seen it. It's at the FIT library. So you're more than welcome to check that out. Draping for Apparel Design, this book offers a comprehensive guide providing step-by-step instruction for beginning pattern making and advanced techniques for more experienced individuals. This book reflects current industry standards, images of diverse body type, and information about half-scale forms. My name is Keith A. Fraley. I'm a tenure-track assistant professor here at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. I teach in the Department of Fashion Business Management FBM program. I'll be moderating today's talk, and we might have a small Q&A afterwards, maybe, with that one, or have discussion as she's going through. So thank you, Dr. Susan Ashdown, for joining us today, and welcome to FIT.
Thank you for that great introduction, Keith. I'm very pleased to be with you to talk about Draping for Apparel Design and how I edited the fourth edition of this amazing book. I am the revising editor of the book that was originally written by Helen Joseph Armstrong. Let me get my PowerPoints up. Oh, oops.
You got it there? You need any help?
No, it's not answering my clicks. There it goes. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's good.
I love the picture on the book, by the way. I just want to tell you that.
Yeah, you know, as an author, one thing you should know when you author books is that the publisher controls the covers.
Okay.
Although they did present me with a series of images, and thank goodness they and I agreed on the one that we ended up with. So
Yeah,
it's never
good
a problem
choice,
for me.
good choice, good choice.
Yeah. Thank you. I love it. I love it. So I want to talk about the book today, but I'm going to talk about other things too. The influences that shaped my perspective and the decisions I made for this project are embedded in my unconventional background. So I want to start with a brief story of my life and my careers, and then I'll describe the changes and the additions that I made to the textbook, and then the new tool that's offered with the book, the half-scale forms, that can change the way we teach and learn pattern making. But before I begin, I want to tell you why I wanted to make the changes in the book, why it's so important that this book and others in our teaching books need some attention, basically. So these are the books from the 1950s that I learned from. The fashions are different, the drawings are much less refined, and they contain much more text and fewer visuals. But basically, modern apparel textbooks teach pattern making and construction in exactly the same way as these books. So our books need to be rewritten. And there's one really important reason that we need to change our focus in the way that we teach and learn apparel. Our apparel industry is badly broken. We all know by now the serious sustainability problems caused by our industry, how we're degrading water supplies, wasting energy, and filling landfills. We face severe sustainability issues from offshoring to countries with few or no environmental or social controls, from fast fashion dynamics, and from relying on outdated design, manufacturing, and marketing methods. These factors result in too much clothing that ends up in the landfills, even after being barely used. Of course, we virtuously donate our clothing instead of throwing it away. But even then, a large proportion of it is sent overseas, where it destroys local clothing economies, and where about 40% of it ends up in the landfills overseas. One of my colleagues, Lucy Dunn, says, "We're making trash as an industry." I believe that the system of ready-to-wear sizing cannot provide well-fitting clothing for the population. We've lost track of the fact that at its inception, ready-made clothing was never intended to be worn off the rack with no alterations. Alterations were included in the price of the garment. Over half of our population is dissatisfied with the fit of ready-to-wear clothing. Manufacturers and retailers encourage following fads and constant purchase of more and more clothing, but without good fit and quality, more does not satisfy us. This leads to closets stuffed with clothes that we do not wear, and these problems have increased exponentially since the introduction of fast fashion. One closet study from 2012 shows that only about 30% of the clothes people have in their closets are used, and individual pieces of clothing are worn only 7 to 10 times before being discarded. These numbers have actually probably changed since 2012, since we know that some fast fashion styles are purchased with the intention of only wearing them once or twice. So the solutions to the problems in our industry do not lie in making clothing from sustainable materials, no waste cutting, pattern making, creating a circular economy, or improving factory and manufacturing conditions. It lies in making better designed and better fitting clothing, encouraging customers to value their clothing and not discard it when barely worn. I believe that students need to understand both body variation in the population and the fit of clothing, not just how to correct fit, but with a deep understanding of the pattern making concepts behind well-balanced, well-fitted garments. I believe we need to train the next generation for a future industry where all clothing that is produced is loved, valued, and worn long enough to justify its embodied resource use. This can only happen if we can provide good fit and good design for anyone of any size or shape. I believe that the current design, manufacturing, and distribution methods must be changed. Draping of patterns instead of current industry flat pattern practice has a place, I believe. And I will talk about this more at the end of the presentation. So this is the path to making clothing, not trash. And we need to change the way we teach fashion design. So I've reached these conclusions based on 40 years of teaching pattern making and 30 years of research on body variation, sizing, and fit. But you know, my enthusiasm for working with different body shapes and my understanding of clothing fit actually predate my teaching and research career. My training was not in fashion design. This early training and my first career are what shaped my perspective. I grew up in rural North Carolina and was sewing from an early age, but wasn't interested in fashion. I was a tomboy, and I liked wearing dungarees best. When time came for college, I chose a liberal arts college in the Midwest, Grinnell College in Iowa. I majored in languages, but quickly changed to a theater major after working in the costume shop. After graduating, I went on to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, again majoring in theater arts, a degree that I didn't finish. I also worked in a couple of apparel factories as a sewing operator during this time. And then I got a job at the Milwaukee Repertory Theater in Wisconsin, where I eventually ended up as costume shop manager. After 5 years at the Rep, I applied for and got the job of lecturer and costume shop manager of Theater Cornell at Cornell University. In all, between graduate school and theater jobs, summer stock, I worked in costume shops for 20 years prior to my career in apparel design. So I think it's important to understand my work in costuming. In the theatrical costume, every challenge is different. Costuming involves an endless number of clothing silhouettes on a wide range of bodies, by different shapes, different sizes, with every fabric and material imaginable, and additional functional challenges to overcome, such as fast changes. So this set of pictures are all from the Milwaukee Repertory Theater. I was so pleased to find these pre-digital age photos online, and I thank the Archives Department of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Library for preserving them. So working in the theater, I costumed every body size and shape, from little children to the actor whose waist was so large I needed 2 tape measures to encompass it. I also costumed dogs, horses, puppets, everything. But I not only made clothing, I also modified bodies, and I think this is important. So these are some extreme examples. In these 2 photos, the actors each have 2 working legs. I created the illusion of missing legs using body and clothing fit manipulations. Then the other issue is working with bodies, but also working with fit. So both of, the surf owner in this production of Dead Souls, the one in the cap, he wears a fat suit that I crafted. He's not that big. They also have prosthetics on the face.
Dr. Ashdown, this looked like it was really fun time back then as well. It looked like you really enjoyed it.
It was a ball. I really did. Yeah, there was so much going on. The directors and costume designers I worked with were amazing. The challenges were incredible. But yeah, I loved working with bodies, working with materials, working with shapes, working with movement, all these things. Yeah. And fit, like I say, fit is really important. So clothing fit helps define the characters in the theater. So the Dead Souls costumes were deliberately designed to fit too tightly on these greedy, corrupt, surf-owning landowners, okay? But on the other hand, the surf costume and then Marley's costume from Christmas Carol, they hang on the actors to portray an emaciated body. And here's another surf, Mother Courage, okay? But Mother Courage, she's a peasant, but she was also a war profiteer and a successful businesswoman. So she and her children wear well-fitting and aesthetically pleasing versions of peasant clothing. So you see, it's not just, oh, clothe this person in rags, oh, clothe this person in an late 17th century jacket. You really need to look at bodies, the styles, the silhouettes, the fit, everything, the materials. Marley's clothing is not only misfit, it's also distressed and dirtied to look as if he just rose from the grave. But the costume needed to be washed between performances, so it has permanent dirt made with paints and dyes. One counterintuitive thing about theatrical costumes is the fabric that makes the best rags on stage is a coarse woven overdyed Dupioni silk. On the other hand, to make the elegant brocades and velvets for wealthy characters, the best choice for the stage is to use inexpensive fabrics that are manipulated and dyed and painted and silk screened and flat-lined to change their properties. And that's what we did with the brocades that Capulet and the nurse from Romeo and Juliet are wearing in this photo. So, and of course, I made many corsets, many corsets from every period that changed the body profiles of the actresses. But here's where movement comes in. The importance of posture and movement and its relationship to the fit of clothing, okay? Corsets were not successful if the actress didn't take the period posture. The corset doesn't force them into a posture. The actress needs to train her body to maintain the posture appropriate for the period. You can change the silhouette, but that doesn't do the whole job. So I spent a lot of time coaching movement, both for corsets and also for fat suits and pregnant pads, where if the actor doesn't look like they're carrying weight, it doesn't work. It looks fake. So in my work in theater, I was not a fan of home sewing patterns, which usually cause more problems than they solved. So I patterned from scratch, drafting and fitting slopers to the repertory actors that I costumed for multiple shows, and generally draping for actors that I would only costume once. So this period of my life, I was fascinated with bodies, making them, changing them, understanding how they move, and clothing them in many different fabrics, different fits, and different silhouettes. I loved the fabrics, their actual properties, and what they projected on stage, which were different, and ways to manipulate them. I was a problem solver and a technical designer, and I still am. I learned about clothing fit by creating many different kinds of fit on many different actors, but I'm still not interested in fashion. So in my job as a lecturer in the theater department at Cornell, I acquired a library of pattern making books to help teach classes in making costumes. And this is where I first encountered Helen Joseph Armstrong's flat pattern book. This is her first book. Helen Joseph Armstrong is a professor, designer, and author based in Los Angeles. I've only met her once, very briefly, in passing when I was in California for a conference. So this first book, her flat pattern book, was written in 1985 and is known and appreciated worldwide. It's in its 5th edition, and it's incredibly comprehensive. It covers an impressive range of different styles, and it has more than 1,400 technical illustrations, very clear, precise, and informative illustrations. It's also been published in many different languages. Then in the year 2000, Helen published her draping book. I used this book in my classes for almost 20 years through the various editions. When the publishers contacted me and asked me if I'd be willing to submit a proposal to edit the 4th edition, I refused, as I couldn't imagine editing the book I had so much respect for and that had a major effect on my own teaching. But I knew that as important as the concepts were in Helen's book, they were not implemented reliably throughout the book, nor were they effectively presented for the modern student. Helen wasn't available to discuss or interact in this editing process, so I decided to honor her work by bringing it into the 21st century.
Hey, Dr. Ashdown.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about, I hear you say that with Helen Joseph Armstrong, you didn't work together too much for the 4th edition.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had no contact, and the editors made it clear to me from the very beginning that we would have no contact, and that's as much as I can say. She's quite elderly now. I'm pretty elderly too, but she's older than me. So, but you know, it was interesting because I had thought about writing a book myself on draping, but I couldn't figure out how to disentangle my own ideas from hers. I had started using it so early in my teaching career, and I know we borrow from each other all the time, but I wanted to honor her. And I realized the best way to honor her would be to present her book through my lens, but keeping it her book. And I very much did. I changed what I felt needed to be changed to bring everything into focus, but the essentials she already had. So, yeah, it was an interesting process. I'm now going to edit, hopefully have a proposal in to work with another book, which I can't talk about now, but on that one I'll be working, the author and I will be working together, which I'm looking forward to. I like working with other people, but it was interesting to have a very, to be able to focus on my own ideas with this book. Yeah.
So whenever you're ready to write the next book, you're more than welcome to come back here to FIT.
Okay. Yeah, the process takes a couple of years, so contact me in a couple of years if our proposal's accepted, which I think it will be.
And I think I'll be here. I'll be here.
Okay. So let's return briefly to 1988 and the transition I made from theater to the Department of Textiles and Apparel at Cornell. So my position in the theater department was where I discovered that I loved teaching, but not in theatrical costuming. I was getting disenchanted, mostly because working in theater can make an impact in the world, but only if you have the magic combination of a good director, a good designer, and a good technician. And that happens often, but not always. And I wanted something more. I was still not interested in fashion, but I became interested in functional apparel design. I could see that perfecting the fit and function of firefighters' uniforms and chemical protective suits and workers' clothing of all types could directly improve the safety and comfort of real people. And it has the same complex set of problems that the theatrical costuming had. So it was great. So how was I going to do this? I went back to school at the age of 38. So I got a master's degree at Cornell in functional apparel design, and then went on to the University of Minnesota for a PhD. And there was where my focus on the perception of clothing fit came about. So I finished these degrees in just 5 years. I don't recommend it. I planned to teach functional design, but I ended up returning to Cornell for a teaching and research program. So the topic of body variation, clothing sizing, and fit became the focus of my research program at Cornell. Now, as I said, I wanted to teach functional apparel design, but there was an amazing teacher of functional apparel design at Cornell, so there was no place for me there. So I found myself teaching pattern making to fashion design students, even though I had no training in fashion design. Pattern making, yes, but none in design. But I found that I loved teaching these designers, these students, for their creativity and their willingness to try anything. It was a great experience. But again, not having come from a fashion background and having so much experience with different body sizes and shapes, I was not happy with the standard dress forms in the studio, and I was not happy with the narrow focus of the available textbooks. I wanted students to work with a variety of body types. And this photo is from the Human Ecology Archives, taken in my office in 1995. And you can see one of the larger dress forms I purchased for the studios. I thought it was important enough to have it in the background, right? So I purchased some larger dress forms. But the barriers to what I wanted to do were overwhelming. Students resisted projects designed to work with different body types. Remember, this is 1995. It was a totally unheard of question. Even the plus size push hadn't happened then. Let's see, cost and storage problems made it difficult to have a supply of different dress forms. Dress forms take up a lot of room, and they're expensive. More importantly, though, the industry that the students were training for required them to design for the standard fashion body. So my desire to expand the students' appreciation for and ability to design for different bodies went on the shelf. But the problems in the industry with clothing fit were increasingly obvious in my research. And these were problems that were soon to be intensified greatly with the introduction of fast fashion around the year 2000. So, but in 2000, this is when things changed for me in many ways. First, I had an amazing break. I got funding from an alumna of the college and a grant to purchase a full 3D body scanner, an incredible tool that had only been perfected a couple of years earlier. I was only the second apparel program in the country to get a scanner for apparel research. This allowed us to capture, come on, move, yep, a wide range of bodies, and for those who gave permission to save these digital bodies for future research. These are full 3D digital captures, and they, not just a collection of measurements. Whoops, sorry, back up. I just wanted to play the movie again. Play. Okay.
And Dr. Ashdown, I think I did this with you at some point. I wonder if you still have that in the file somewhere. I remember
your scan, probably.
Yeah.
As far as I know, of course, I'm not there anymore. As a retiree, you never know what's going to happen to your research lab.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
it
give,
was a great
they
experience doing it with you, though.
Yeah, yeah. They have a new, at the lab, they have a new 3D body scanner, another Human Solutions one, even more elegant than the one that we had. So it's pretty fun. Yeah. So, so with the scanner, we could find ways to quantify body shape along with new kinds of body measurements, and we could look at the fit of clothing in a new way. It was also a wonderful tool to use in teaching, obviously, and I introduced it to the classroom whenever I could. And in 2000, that's the year that Draping for Apparel Design was published. This book helped me to focus on pattern making issues in a new way and supported my teaching methods for draping class. So we've got the bodies and now we've got the pattern making falling into place. Okay, so the book I was currently, so this is the first edition of Draping for Apparel Design. The book I was currently using for draping class was the Ahmed and Crawford book, and the reason I liked them was that it showed the shape of the dress form through the sketch of the muslin, so you could actually see the relationship of the garment you're draping through and the body very clearly in the sketches. But as usual, the focus was on fashion model proportions and aesthetics throughout the book. So when Helen's book came out, it was different. It also showed the dress form through the muslin, but three things made the book stand out from any other book on the market. First, it showed real body shapes. Okay, the teaching was still the same throughout the book, but in the beginning, it included a section on body shapes, postures, and proportions, and instructions on how to create a custom form, and acknowledgement that bodies vary from the standard dress form, which you don't find in other apparel books at all, or didn't back then, and very few now even. Second, the book included lessons on basic skills. So those 1950s books, they never had to teach that because you learned from your mom or your grandma or your aunt or someone how to set a pin, how to cut fabric. All these things are how to mark on fabric. All these things are skills that must be learned. And if attention is not paid to them, then beginning students will flounder. And it's amazing to me how many people don't recognize that you need to build the skills up first. But then the most important thing, I think, is that the instructions included directions on how to balance the drape on the form. Other draping books imply that if you just follow their directions, you will automatically get a perfect pattern, which is absurd. The most skilled pattern makers still needs to adjust and balance the draped panels before removing them from the dress form. So I taught with Helen's book for almost 20 years, and I knew both its considerable strengths and its weaknesses. And most of all, I wanted to make it relevant for today's students. So I knew a little bit about that from my teaching, but I also did a lot of thinking about it to try and bring it into focus. So this book, like all pattern making books, perpetuated the point of view that clothing design and construction is a simple process. Our pattern making books are written as how-to books, as if learning the steps for making a set number of styles is the only goal for apparel students. This was appropriate in the 1950s when the task was to teach housewives how to provide clothing for a household, but they're not the way we need to teach and learn today. Professional designers need to understand the interactions of body, materials, and silhouettes, not just how to make clothing. Therefore, in this edition, I changed the approach to an engineering approach. And I'll talk about what I mean in a minute. So I focused on discussions of overall processes and deeper dives into the why of many of the procedures we take for granted. And much of this I had to work out for myself because it's in no book that I've ever seen. I think a lot of people know a lot of it, but yeah, it's buried in their brains. So if you think about it, clothing is actually one of the most complex of all designed objects. Apparel designers design for a wide variation of bodies using materials with countless different properties. Clothing fills so many different environmental, social, and aesthetic needs. It interacts with moving bodies. It impacts temperature regulation, and it interfaces directly with our sensitive and our sensing skin. However, the making of clothing carries the stigma of being women's work and fashion has been dismissed as frivolous for decades. The traditional male-based engineering fields, designing and building machines, engines, and structures, are seen as more substantial, complex, and important, although they encompass so many fewer materials and conditions, so much so they're capable of being reduced to a set of equations. Apparel design is much more complex and therefore requires a less respected but an effective, interactive, and heuristic approach to be successful. So one of my primary tasks was to rewrite the text to change from making to an approach that I define as engineering of clothing. Other changes I made included eliminating references to US sizing and adding metric measures next to each and every one of the imperial measurements in the book, both in the text and the technical drawings, and that was a lot. I didn't feel like a chart in the back of the book was sufficient. In order to make this book more effective worldwide, I wanted those metric measures right there. I also replaced key drawings with photos and made videos for many of the basic procedures. The videos were really important to me because I wanted to deflect attention from the draping videos on YouTube, which are universally bad. They're not effective for a lot of reasons. I wanted to keep the full range of designs in the book while reducing the size of the book. It was a real doorstop. I wanted to introduce a more structured organization. And this wouldn't have been possible without the ability to put material online. There are an equal number of pages online as there are in the book, along with vocabulary flashcards and quizzes and videos. So when you get the book, pay for the online material, get the card in the back, and link up to the website. You'll have access to it for a year. You can print off any of the PDFs you want. And if you want to renew to have access to the videos, it's a $20 a year cost. So there's a lot of information there. I also made extensive materials for instructors online, including a discussion of goals and learning objectives for each chapter and editable PowerPoints. It's tough for new beginning professors in the teaching these days. You have so many demands on you, and to have that beginning to take and then adjust for your own needs is important. Most important, I wanted to acknowledge the full range of body types in the population. Also to eliminate the terms perfect and ideal when referring to specific postures and body types. This is not accurate. No body is perfect. Nobody is more perfect than another. Bodies are all equally valuable. And same with posture. Great new book out on posture. Okay, so what's that?
I agree with that indeed. The posture and yeah.
There's a new book out. I'm sorry, I don't have the author in front of me right now. It's called Slouch. So I recommend that book highly. So one of my primary goals was to increase the representation of different body types. The fashion illustrations in the 3rd edition are great sketches of the established fashion style, but they're all young, Caucasian, tall, slender models that verge on the anorexic. This popular style of fashion figure is a unique aesthetic that has steadily developed since the 1920s. It's not embedded it shouldn't be embedded in our industry. There is nothing, again, inherently more beautiful. It's that we've been trained that way since the 1920s. This body type represents only 2% of the population. So we have the sketches, then we have the dress forms, and as you can see, the proportions are different, and that's good because they're closer to reality. So the dress forms in the technical drawings match the standard dress forms used in all apparel studios. They're realistically proportioned, but they still represent the smaller hourglass-shaped percentage of the population. Industry fit models are often this size and shape, attempting to deliver good fit with proportionally grade patterns. This does not provide either good fit or acceptable aesthetics for most people. So our industry is not creating clothes for people. It's creating a fantasy world for very few people. So unrealistic fashion figures and small dress forms are still part of our industry. I hope that will change. The technical drawings and the fashion sketches needed to stay in the book. It's true that students need to develop skills on one body type before learning how to pattern for a variety of bodies. First step is actually to learn how to create patterns. So these images stayed, but I was determined to add more diverse images to remind designers that they're designing for real people, not for fashion models. And the chapter headings are what gave me an opportunity to do this. This is a little clip from the chapter headings from the third edition. They added up to 40 pages of fashion sketches of these tall young Caucasians. So he eliminated them, all these images, and for each chapter introduced a set of new images that represent real people, not fashion models. So here are some of my people from the pants chapter. I collected photographs from everywhere for this photograph, online, from friends, and from students and my colleagues. I wanted photos of people who are comfortable in their bodies and in their clothing. I looked for images of people of all ages, all ethnicities, all sizes, all proportions, and all conditions, finding clothing styles that were appropriate for each chapter. Then the amazing artist Yelena Safonova made drawings from these images and created amazing layouts from them for each chapter heading.
This is diversity, equity, and inclusion in working. So I love that you did that.
Yep. And I'll point out some of the figures as we go. Of course, the older woman, I tried to do at least half of them from mid-30s to over 55, from, mature to my age. And also some very young girls. And of course, every body type with hips or with slim hips, or each one is beautiful in its own way. And you can see that this woman loves her hips. She well should. And then, of course, we have this young woman in a wheelchair. So I'll point out some others as we go. So, but I was looking for 60% non-Caucasian and at least half that have curves or significant body weights, and I have all the way up to plus size. So, and I have 5 males in the mix as well. So. Okay, so these other images had to stay. I was still unhappy with them, but I realized that I have a simple way to change their focus from fashion model to clothing, at least, okay? So I cropped away part of their faces. And that immediately puts your attention not on this beautiful model, but on the clothes that she's wearing, and that's where I want it. At least one purchaser at Amazon was very unhappy with this. She didn't like me taking away the fashion model. So. Okay, so let's take a brief tour of this book to see some of the changes. And this way I can show you the chapter headings images in glorious color because the book is in black and white. So the first 3 chapters introduce the tools and materials of the draper, and then the next 3 are foundational skills and concepts. So the first one is on tools. And in this chapter, I emphasize the importance of buying top quality professional tools instead of relying on the local fabric store or online sites for home sewists. Chapter 2 introduces textiles and their properties. Here's my first male. Okay. There was space. I love textiles and their properties, and I think it's so important for a designer to understand them. But there's limited space in the book to do much with fabric properties, but I could encourage students by telling them to learn about this important topic by taking as many classes as they can and by close observation of the fabrics they do use in their own project, keeping swatches and records of the work and what worked and what didn't and why related to the fabric. However, I was able to provide some information for visually oriented students with a set of photos that illustrate fabric variation and can also help with vocabulary. So I got images of 60 different fabrics, collecting fabrics from my own collection and asking other people for them, and in some cases purchasing them. So these images include two drape. Okay, well, first they include the information. So they're labeled with fabric names, the fiber content, the yarn structure, and sometimes the size of the, a rough description of the size of the yarn, and then the weave or the knit structure. So each sample has these bits of information. And then I captured two images of the fabric, one draped over the shoulder of a dress form to show how it drapes, and the other over, this is a 6-inch high cup to show the drape in a more structured way, but more comparative. And then I photographed close views of the fabric. And the first one always has a light shining through it because that way you can kind of see the density of the fabric of the swatch and sometimes the yarn size depending on the swatch. And then one just, let from the front. And then finally, I took a microscopic view to show the structure of each fabric more clearly. So there are 60 of these, and they give you a comparative way of looking at, and again, as I said, all of the information about each one. This was a huge project, but hey, it was the pandemic. What else was I going to do? So, chapter 3 is about the most important tool for draping, the dress form. Understanding the relationship between the dress form and the model is an essential concept and encompasses more than just bust, waist, and hip measurements. And I wanted to convey this in this chapter, the chapter images, by having a conventional dress form. And then this one that is a custom form that shows the shorter proportions of this young lady, and this one with her curves, again, in her shown in her custom dress form. Okay, so measurement instructions and comparisons between the body and the dress form are in the text, and both posture and proportions are illustrated and discussed. And again, this is from Helen Joseph Armstrong's original work, and it is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I did keep balanced here. Each of these is balanced in their own way, and I think in the next edition I'm going to change it to upright. Really read that book Slouch, because it tells you where this concept came from and why this or any posture is perfectly wonderful. This is an example of the engineering approach that I was working for. The traditional apparel landmarks are described very generally. Measure from the shoulder point to the neckline for shoulder seam length. So I have a PDF in the online materials with this chapter that illustrate the structure of the body, the skeletal system, the joints. So this is where you move at the sites of the joints, and the important skeletal points that can be palpated that relate to body movement. And this provides you both with an understanding of how the body moves, and therefore how you as a designer need to design clothing that moves. And it also gives you reliable measurements then, because you're measuring not from some generalized point, but from a point that you can palpate for a specific point on a bone that we all have, that makes it much more reliable information. Instructions are also provided online. I moved it to online for padding a form to customize it to match both body measurements, but more importantly, body shapes and proportions of clients or models for your designs. And this illustrates clearly differences between actual bodies and dress forms. And then there are extensive materials on half-scale forms that are included in this chapter, but I'm going to talk about that at the end of the talk because I have so much to say about it. So let's continue with our little tour. So this is half scale. Let's see. So the next chapter is essential skills. And what I did was I took all these skills that were scattered through the first 3 or 4 chapters, and I put them in one chapter, because I think that it's important that students practice these skills before applying to the draping process. Some students won't need to, but still to go over them and see them and recognize them as a skill they've learned is important. But it's particularly useful for beginners. These techniques are not instinctive, they must be learned. And this chapter is illustrated entirely with photographs. The 5th chapter, the basic silhouette, teaches the draping process for the one dart bodice, and then a combined drafting and draping process for the basic skirt, and a draft for the basic set-in sleeve. It also describes fitting and balancing the patterns and truing patterns. These are all foundational concepts. And because that first drape, the one dart bodice, is so important because you learn so much from that first drape, I created both a set of photographs and videos for it. So the one dart bodice has 3 sets of instruction to accommodate any learning style. In the book, you have the photographs. Then the video version is online, and there are 2 videos, 2 15-minute videos that show the drape and, the basic drape. And then I honor and respect the actual original drawings, which are excellent. So those are also online if you feel like it's better, easier to learn from the sketch than from the photographs or the video. So any way you want it. So now we're going to move to the greater part of the book, the designs. There are about 115 styles total. 75 of them are in the book. I added a few for this edition, and 40 of them were moved online. The ones that were small variations of the ones that are in the book. The book now has a very clear through line and structure that it lacked before, but everything's there. So if you've used the book before, your favorite style has not disappeared. So the next 8 chapters, from chapter 6 to chapter 13, cover the most common ready-to-wear styles, with each chapter introducing a new draping technique or concept. So chapter 6 is dart manipulation, and it demonstrates identical silhouettes with different dart orientations, and then some dart conversions from darts to gathers, for example. Let's see, the draping technique that it introduces is the use of style tape on the dress form. Chapter 7 is bodice styles, and this replaces darts with few darts, but it focuses on panels that are pinned together at seam lines to create different styles. So complex seam relationships such as easing the princess seam over the bust are demonstrated in this chapter. Chapter 8, skirts, introduces draping away from the body silhouette with flare, pleats, and gathers. And chapter 9, dress foundations, introduces silhouettes that cross the waist with no waist seam. Double-ended or fisheye darts are introduced, and different fits in relationship to the body are demonstrated, but all hanging directly from the shoulder. And this group of people, again, a wide range of ages and ethnicities, and bodies. I love the middle one here in the skirt group, again, who loves her body. It's not a fashion body, but she loves it, and it's very clear. Lots of ethnicities, and again, ages, which was so important to me. The people in the world, not the fashion models. Okay, pants, we've already seen this image. Introduces a combined drafting draping procedure in which the crotch seam shape and inseam are created with a simple draft, and then the final silhouette is draped. It shows different fits over the buttocks and thighs, and they're demonstrated by explaining how the crotch and inseam angles create these different fits. Again, this technique is one that Helen developed, and it's quite good, I think. You might, if you know a different or better way to draft the crotch, feel free to adopt it. But I like this one because it's so simple. And that draft drape combination is the fastest and most effective way to create pants patterns. However, it wasn't explained. The actual mechanism that occurs when you change different parts of the draft weren't explained. So that now is compared and explained more thoroughly. Chapter 11, collar styles, demonstrates various collar and neckline shapes. Colors add a level of complexity because they fold over to create a three-dimensional shape. And then this is my youngest one, by the way, this little child. I love her. Chapter 12 that has kimono raglan and drop shoulder styles. And this demonstrates a set of sleeve styles that are incorporated into the bodice with no arm's eye seam, and they're draped, and the way they're draped is over an attachable arm, which is basically a simple tube that you can attach to the shoulder of the form, and you can change the angle of it, okay, from a very high angle to a lower angle. And this has implications into the range of movement that you have in that garment. And that's all explained very thoroughly in the chapter. Chapter 13 is shirts and blouses, and this introduces silhouettes that are created without darts or seams, and these patterns require really careful balancing. It demonstrates that the simplest shapes can be the most difficult to fit well. Then extensive discussion of sleeve cap height and its relationship to fit and range of movement of the arm are also given this is also in an online document. Then then we get into the final 6 chapters of the book, and they have more complex styles. And the first one is built-up necklines, and the built-up necklines are supported from below. And this is actually a relatively simple concept, and the drape can be tricky because you're creating a shape on a shape. But there's also an online document that discusses an incredible variety of styles separated from below, which I think is important. And then cowls, and just demonstrates many different cowl shapes and how to get to them. And here is our young woman with an artificial leg. Chapter 16 introduces contour draping, and this is strapless dresses, and there's a section on corsets. And all garments in this chapter are supported from, but with boning and with structural layers. Sometimes it's very light, but it's necessary to have some kind of support within the garment for a strapless. And all these construction methods are described in an online document. And here we have our pregnant lady. I don't know if you caught that. And chapter 7 demonstrates how to work with bias, with fabric on the bias, which is quite fascinating and complex. And I love that Helen Joseph Armstrong does not make light of it. She really teaches you the complexities of working with a bias piece of fabric. I introduced some more information on the properties of bias fabrics and why they behave the way they do. And here we have our little person with the proportions unique to this population. And this is actually the daughter of a close friend of mine. So my closest friend from high school. So, and again, loves her body, and as well she should. Yeah. So chapter 18 is jackets and coats, and it includes tailored jackets that were in the original version 3, but in this version, I have added casual jackets as well and draped a couple of them on male dress forms. This concept of draping for layered clothing is demonstrated here, and tailoring methods and construction techniques are included in an online document. I actually reduced the number of chapters on knits because I felt like knitwear patterns are generally more effectively drafted than draped. But some processes are easier to do with draping, and I demonstrated those in this book, in this chapter, and also a short description of knit properties. So that's a fast overview of the book. Now I want to talk about 2 topics in more detail. First, why I believe that draping is such an important technique and why we should change from that, from the flat pattern method in the industry to a draping method, and how we can do that. And second, half-scale forms. They're related, these 2 topics. So pattern making methods. In flat pattern, you draft a pattern, you fit it as a sloper, and then you modify it with pattern manipulation techniques on the table. This all happens in 2D. It's based on linear measurements, and additional fitting is required to correct fit. You can't capture the organic shapes of bodies that vary so greatly in posture in a handful of measurements. You can't even capture it in a huge number of measurements, which are more than we can cope with. The points in which from which the clothing hangs differs depending on the body. And clothing fit requires that the garment relate appropriately to our individual bodies. So flat pattern methods require many iterations of fitting to be successful. Now, if the dress form matches the measurements, the body shape, and the posture, I'm talking about a custom dress form, then the drape pattern requires very little fitting. Clothing fit is determined by the factors of line, grain, ease, balance, and set. In draping, we establish the lines of the garment directly on the body with style tape, so making those decisions on the body. We establish the grain line of each panel as it's introduced, and we create the exact ease needed, again, at each point on the specific point on the body with ease pinches or folds. Once all the panels are draped, they are adjusted for balance. So you take them apart and re-angle things and re-pin them until you get a perfectly balanced garment. If these four elements, line, grain, ease, and balance, are perfected, the set of the garment will be correct. So when draping, we have a tactile control of the relationship of the fabric, the body, and the silhouette. But it does require a custom dress form for the best results. If you're fitting on a form that is not the body that you're designing for, then you will need to fit it in order to achieve the fit you want. So let's move on to half scale. So half scale forms have been common in apparel studios for decades in only one shape and limited sizes. These traditional forms neither represent real body proportions nor do they match the full scale forms in the studio. And they were only used to experiment with pattern shapes, which were then repeated on the full scale form. Modern dress forms are very different. Alvanon now sells half-scale forms made from the 3D files of their full-scale forms, which were made from body scans. So you see they're an exact replica of the full-scale form. This means that you can drape your final pattern on the half-scale form and then scale it up. So draping on half-scale, there are lots of advantages. It's faster to create patterns. And the thing that I've discovered, which is just magic, particularly for younger students, is that it's easier to see the proportions. You don't need to step away from your drape. You don't need to look at what you're doing in a mirror to give yourself some distance in order to see the proportions. It's right there.
Dr. Ashdown.
Yeah.
So when I was at Cornell on campus, I remember you were introduced as heavy within the program, and it was really helpful for the students. And I think it was really groundbreaking during that time. That was the first time that I really got introduced to that. And yes, there was smaller workspaces. The students could really get intimate with the half body form. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to that.
Yeah.
When I got introduced to that, when you introduced it to us, it was really helpful for the students.
That's great. Yeah. You know, I actually worked with, let's see. Yeah, I actually worked with Alvanon to develop these forms. Before that time, there were no half-scale forms that had legs. And I developed them to work in a product development class that I had. And I told them, we need to do one. You've got the scan. Let's make it with legs. And it really does, I think, change the way that you can, the kinds of things you can do with the form, and also the awareness of the body that's underneath. So yeah, I'll take credit. And we've worked with them so many ways since then. So yeah, as you said, the workspace, you know, and this is so much more cool working around a table like this where you can see what other students can do. A studio full of students and dress forms is twice as many people as just a studio full of people, right? Because you've got the student in their dress form. Things get crowded very quickly and you can't see what the person across the room is doing. So I found this was, I think, much more effective, particularly for beginning students and for these fun projects where we take scraps of fabric and create just for the joy of creating.
The part that I like the most is that last part about the less fabric needed. So talk about sustainability and how can you have an impact on that. So I really like that part in reference to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. It's great for teachers because when you do get down to real projects, it's easier to store and move and grade these projects. You can grade them in your office instead of spending hours in the studio.
I remember you pushing this thing down the hallway every so often. I remember that. Yes.
Yep. I loved it. Now, the less fabric, you think, okay, half scale, half fabric. No, it's a quarter of the fabric. The reason being that it's a quarter in height, a quarter in width, and a quarter in breadth. So you literally need a quarter of the fabric to create them. So, and the forms are, which really helps with sustainability. It really does. And the forms are also less expensive. So, and I'll show you how in a minute. So there's some disadvantages, of course, and you need to be aware of them. The first one is that you really have to be precise when you're working with half-scale forms, because any error you make is doubled. If you want a 1/4 inch of ease, you need to pinch a 1/16 of an inch fold in order to get that ease that you want. So you need to develop the skills that it needs if you're going to make final patterns on the dress form. Not impossible, not hard to do, but you need to develop those skills. The drape of the fabric is different in half scale, as it will be when you scale up. But we're used to that because we're used to draping in muslin, and the properties of the muslin are different from the final fabric of the garment as well. So I have not found it's as big an issue as I thought it would be originally. And then, of course, the scaling of the patterns is an additional step. This isn't a problem if you're digitizing the pattern into the computer anyway, but not every apparel program has this capability. However, it's really not hard to scale patterns up by hand. It's a simple process. It doesn't take long. A more complex pattern, of course, takes a little longer. You still need precision, but it's a very simple 1 to 2, 2 to 1 scaling up. So the half-scale forms have more advantages than disadvantages, but the real game changer is the custom half-scaled form. On a custom form, it's possible to create a pattern with only minor changes needed in fitting the pattern at the end. So this is our first custom half-scale dress form. Very dear to my heart. With this form, we started developing a relatively easy and inexpensive way of creating custom half-scale dress forms for 3D body scans. This one was created in 2013 by designers Brandon Wynn and Laura Zwanzinger. Oh, look them up. They're doing amazing things these days, both of them.
Amazing, by the way. I just want to add that in there. And if I'm correct, this is the one that was in the museum.
Yep,
Is that
yep.
right? Okay. All right.
She's quite famous. She was featured at MoMA in the Fashion is Fashion Modern exhibit. That was Laura's doing. She got her included. So well-traveled.
And a shout out to Laura. I saw her earlier this semester. She's doing amazing, by the way. So if you guys don't know who she is, go do a quick Google search and get updated with that.
And also Brandon Wynn, who's on a different path, but boy, he's a superstar.
Yeah.
And they were great. I love those students. I love all my students, but they were amazing.
Me too.
Yeah. So the dress forms was named Tallulah by the students, and she now resides in the Cornell Fashion and Textile Collection, as befits a revolutionary figure. So now I'm going to go back and talk about half scale for real bodies now, not custom. So in the book, I've included a set of patterns and instructions to make 4 different half scale forms of real bodies created from body scans. So these are in the online materials with the book, and it uses the method we developed to make these forms very inexpensively. So what we do is we create slices of the body from the body scan that then be cut from foam. You can either use a laser cutter, or this set I cut by hand, and then they're stacked on dowels and covered with a knit fabric. The materials cost about $35 for each form. Plus size, probably a little more, but yeah, around that cost. So the materials are inexpensive. Anyone can do it. Anyone can make these forms. So this shows the stacked form. It shows very clearly one issue is, by the way, we have the little stub arms, but I don't recommend doing them anymore. And I tell in the book how to cut these off to make it without, but then you can use these pieces of foam to make a separate little stub arm that you can pin onto the form. So But what I want to talk about now is you can see how the shoulder shape is jagged, it steps down. Okay, nowhere else on the body is this a real problem. Okay, but across the shoulder where the clothes hang from, it is. And we solve this by making a yoke from a stiff felt fabric that creates this kind of slope we need for the shoulders. Let's see. Then a knit cover is added and style tape is applied. You need very narrow style tape. We discovered that using baby or toddler tights make a great cover. They already have the leg and the crotch shapes, and this minimizes seams, and it's a simple process. You need to unpick the waistband. Sometimes you need to add a piece of knit depending on the size of the form and the need size of the knit, the tights. And then the shoulder seams are sewn by hand, and a little neck collar is sewn by hand. So pretty straightforward. Anyone can do it. And as I said, instructions are in the book along with the scan. So that's the real bodies in the form. There's a hourglass, which will be very, I think, a little longer body lengths than the dress forms in the studios, but otherwise very close to those. And then a rectangular shape, a mature shape, and then, of course, our plus size. Custom half-scale dress forms take a little more effort, but they're still within the reach of anyone who has the minimal amount of resources and the ability to work with 3D data in the computer. So, and this is a process that some of my students developed, and they used a handheld scanner. So handheld scanners are $500 or less, and then low-cost or free software to manipulate the scan in the digital format. And that document is online as well, so you can follow them. Mary Neshe, she just graduated from North Carolina State with her master's degree. I think, no, PhD, I don't know, she just graduated from New York State, North Carolina State. And she recently made a form for herself using these instructions. So if you look her up on LinkedIn, you can see her experience with it. What she found was that the instructions, the computer instructions, are out of date, which of course they are, but with some help from her tech support, she could make the form. So custom half-scale dress forms are of great benefit. They can solve some of the problems that faced me when I tried to introduce students to a variety of body types. Now you can make forms for different models with different body types for students to work with. You can make forms for their models for their fashion show. We found that when we do this, even for freshmen can actually participate in our fashion show at Cornell. And we found that even freshmen who didn't have many skills yet could create better fitting clothing when they had scans of their half-scale models of their forms of their models. So cost and storage is not a problem with these forms. So you can develop a set of forms for a studio that lets students experiment with every type of body now. And because it's relatively easy to learn to create good fit and balance by draping, and because draping on a custom form can be used to make well-fitting clothing, these forms can benefit more than our students. I think that there's a place for this with independent dressmakers. If they have repeat clients, it can help them make clothing more effectively and easily and affordably. Then maker spaces can help with creating or laser cutting the foam slices, I believe. Also, sewists making clothing for themselves and their family and friends. It's a great option. And I think farmers, just as farmers markets provide access to local food, there's a place for slow local systems of clothing production, and there's a place for half scales in this system. This is a sustainable, effective way that's robust to the disruptions that are foreseeable in our future for our communities and for our industry. I believe the norm is that every type of clothing can and should be produced for every age, ethnicity, and body type, and we have the tools to make that happen. I also think the industry could benefit by creating forms of their fitting models, also by expanding the number of fitting models so they don't just have them for a relatively small size, but start to understand and create and hire fit models for the larger sizes. They're not going to be the same shapes as the smaller sizes. your patterns aren't going to grade through the system, but you could do cohorts of 3 sizes, say, and have a fit model for each cohort. And you could provide better clothing fitting, which still isn't going to be ready to wear off the rack, but it'll be closer. So having every designer in the industry have these half-scale forms on their desk gives them the ability to create well-fitting patterns more easily. And I think that also encourages creativity when you're not reduced to looking at something flat on a table or trying to duplicate something that's sketched. Instead, you're interacting with the body. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I want to say. We
This is
definitely
really
need to
good.
explore different ways of, designing, producing, and selling clothing in our industry. Our industry is so bogged down in 19th century technologies. 19th century technologies. Of course, the virtual fit that's coming along is nice. It's wonderful. It can be lots of fun. It can help sell clothes, but it's going to be a long time before it actually captures all the nuances needed to make well-fitting clothing. So maybe that will happen someday, and then we won't need half-scale custom forms. But at this point, it's not there. So, yeah, let's look to the 21st century, and let's get our textbooks out of the 1950s, and let's encourage our industry to provide good fit for everyone, and clothes that they will value and wear. So, yeah,
Dr. Susan Ashdown, thank you so much for this. This
you're
is
welcome.
really informative. I enjoy this very much so, and I think that our viewers will learn a lot from this and will encourage them to look at the book, check it out. And I wanted to ask you, when do you think the fifth edition might come out, or are you even thinking about that yet?
Oh
Where
yeah.
are you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about the fifth edition. I started thinking about the fifth edition the minute that the fourth edition came out.
Got it. Okay.
So
Okay.
this is not perfect. It was made during the pandemic. Some of the ideas that are in this are just in their formative stage and can be and will be improved. But I need help to do that because I'm not teaching anymore. So
Yeah.
those of you who are teaching or using this book as learners, I need you. I need you to let me know what works and more importantly, what doesn't work. And I know
Right.
this is hard because no one ever has time, but the next time or even if you're not using the book, if you see something or think of something that seems to align with the kinds of things I'm talking about, please get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn. I do keep up with it fairly well. If you really want to get down and dirty, my email address is readily available from the Cornell website, and I welcome questions and ideas and discussion and interaction. Yeah, I'm feeling the worst thing about my retirement is I don't have the contact with people that I did before, which doesn't change the fact that I love many, many, many things about retirement. So, yeah.
So I'm gonna throw this out there, Dr. Ashdown. This is a PhD candidate in our at Cornell University. You remember Jenny Lee?
Yes, I
Uh,
do.
Jenny Lee. When you say that you potentially might need someone, I think of her automatically.
Mhm.
So yeah, just put that in the back of your mind because she sits in a lot of space of like circus and
Yep,
theater costume.
yep, yep.
So yeah,
You know,
so I just want to kind of throw that out there.
okay,
Um,
if do we still have a few minutes of time?
yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, let me,
And then also I wanted to ask you while you're looking for that, at the beginning you had mentioned about the on average clothing is worn only 7 to 10 times. I think you said from the 2012 study of closet content. Do you
yep.
think the clothing has been worn, is that has increased or decreased? Like what are your thoughts about that?
Well, we don't have the studies, which I actually would encourage anyone who's looking for something to study. That would be an amazing thing,
Yeah.
to do another closet study at this point.
Yeah, I just want to see what
But
you thought though.
yeah, I think it's less. I
Yeah.
mean, all the pressure we have and and clothing has only gotten worse in its fit and its quality.
Yeah.
Let's see, I'm just trying to do something here. Okay, there we go. Whoops, no, we don't. Okay, I think I can find it now, though. Oh, there it was. Oh, there it was. There we go. Okay. Let's see, I need to show this now, though. Oops. Sorry.
No problem. Technology.
Technology.
No
I really
problem.
want to
Again.
show this. Escape. Okay, let's go here. And then let's minimize this so I can see what I'm doing. And then let's share. And then let's share. Share. There we go. Okay. Whoops. Well, come on. My windows are stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, it's the same thing for me. I get it.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So
Oh, she is.
yeah, one thing I didn't say because I was thinking, oh, I'm going too long, I'm going too long, is that I also created sidebars, not as many as I would like,
Okay.
but I created three. One, a guy that's working in the industry and has been for a few years. One, Jenny, because it's just as you said, she's had such a broad, wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And one, a faculty person who's been working even longer than I have as a designer in the apparel industry and who is trained as an apparel designer, unlike myself. So
Yes. Yes.
these
Okay.
were a really fun part of the book to work on. And like I say, the next edition will have even more people because people are what make it all happen, and they're what make it, I think, uh, accessible and interesting to us all. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I'm just now looking at it, turning to page
Yeah.
19. I didn't even see her in there, so that's
Yeah.
amazing. So
They're at the beginning of the first three chapters. So I'm sorry, at the end of the first three chapters. So chapter 1, 2, and 3 each has a person.
got it, got it. I would say pick me, but I'm not this. I'm more of the business side of fashion. So, and
Yeah.
you already know this more than anything. But I think I know Jenny Lee. I think she would be great for that. So, but
Yeah.
Dr. Susan Ashdown, you have been amazing. I'm so happy that our paths crossed again. So thank you so much for doing this. And of course, all of your other books that you do, the 5th edition, the 6th edition, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever you would like to do, we welcome you back here at FIT and we can do this all over again. I love having these conversations. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to give a quick shout out to Jennifer. Jennifer is kind of behind the scenes a little bit, but she makes all of this happen for us. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for doing this. You have been awesome, and the staff along with Jennifer. So with that, thank you so much.